once a month, me and Katie will do a critique stream where we look at the prose of a book, and then me and Katie do that for about an hour and then talk about genitals for about an hour after that. So, double feature.
Great times. Guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It's me, your host, Maria, and with me today, I have the ruggedly handsome William.
Hey guys, it's getting to that time when my ruggedness needs to get in its haircut because it's getting a little crazy. But today we are doing, and I say but like I know almost none of you will watch this because this is
no one is watching
an obscure series, and this is the second video on it. And so I will say I'm always surprised by people who say this is their favorite podcast. But if you're watching this is your favorite podcast. Congratulations.
Yes, if you watch this episode, we are indeed your favorite podcast, because nobody, like, I was thinking about that while I was finishing up the books yesterday. I was like, nobody is going to watch this video. It is going, if we get like, it'll be like bottom ranked. We'll get like a quarter of the or an eighth of the views we normally get. Like, it's just, Will and I could talk about fish for an hour and 40 minutes, and people would look at it and be like, yeah, and never know. Like type fish if you actually
if you made it this far in the video.
Yes, you made it this far. We're only very shortly in, but it's okay.
But today we are doing the second half of the Keys to the Kingdom series by Garth Nix. I haven't edited the first video, so I wasn't able to rewatch it before this, so hopefully we won't just restate things too much. But the reason we're doing this series, despite the fact that no one will watch this video, and even though this is like our livelihood, so you think we would be more interested in doing popular videos, is because these books are so readable. I read each of these three in there in one day. It was, oh my God, I actually really enjoyed reading this in a way that I don't enjoy reading almost any of the other books on this channel.
It makes me want to read more middle grade, because there is this like almost, I don't want to say quiet simplicity, because that is not, but there is this sense that it's not overly taking itself too seriously, but it earns the moments where it gets to be serious. Like,
yes,
there was a scene that made me cry in the last book. Not bawl, but like tears a little squeaking out, and for a book series that in a very large way keeps a little emotionally distant, because otherwise I think it would be way too dark for the audience it is written for. It manages to earn its like serious moments and the times where things get, and it's just fun. Each book is short, concise. It does the thing. It doesn't overstay its welcome. There are books that are weaker, and we're going to talk about it. There's one of the two of the three we read this time, I would say for me feel like two of the weakest ones, and I have a ranking for me, and at the end we'll compare our rankings as we do. But it was just fun, like it was just a fun, good read. I want to read more middle grade.
I started reading and I was like, okay, I'm gonna read an hour, and then I just read 3 because I was just like, oh, I want to know what happened. I was like, even like, no, I don't want to watch this YouTube video. I want to see what happens next, even though I remember it. I think the thing about it is that you're right. Middle school books do tend to be a little more simplistic because of the audience they're speaking to. But I think the thing is that gels really well with Garth Nix's style, which if you've read Sabriel or read The Left-Handed Booksellers of London, both for an older YA, he has a very distant, simple, but very evocative style that, like, through dialogue, you understand the characters really well, and through that distance. And so, like, that works really well with a more simplistic style of prose and storytelling that a middle schooler would get. And I think that's just like a really happy medium. I actually am a little sad he's doing like the Left-Handed Booksellers of London, because I would love for him to do more of this stuff. I also really loved his Seventh Tower books. Those were actually really formative for me. Unfortunately, I don't think they have audiobooks, so I don't know that we could ever do them. And then those videos would do really poorly.
I think I still own it.
I have 3 or 4, actually. The Fall, Castle, and Anir. And those books actually...
Yeah, that's the one I have.
Yeah, it's... Funnily enough, those books did a lot for me. And I talked about this a little last time, but with, like, feminism and female representation because the guy is the mage and the girl is the warrior. And I was always like, and as a kid, I'm a little like 13-year-old. I'm like, oh, interesting, because it's gender roles are different. And then also they don't get together
Oh
in
my
the end. And I
god.
was like, wait, it's not a romance. I'm like, this is so confusing. Men and women can be friends, but like it's valuable. And again, if you're doing to a middle school book, I actually think it's actually really cool to have that kind of a message.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of I was thinking about that, like, and literally I think almost exact, I mean, it's 7 days of the week, so it can't be exactly half, but if you include Dame Primus, half of the like
The architect is a
like
female. God is a female,
yeah,
and it's like just a
God is
little.
a woman.
Yeah, it's just kind of snuck in there.
And there are these trustees, and like half of them are women, and it's just this really like balanced in every situation cast of characters.
A lot of the denizens are just like, it'll be like a one character line, but it'll be like a woman denizen, and you're like, oh, okay, that's really cool.
Yep.
Like, and again, it's nice as a
On
kid.
the pirate ship, they were half women, and there was named female pirate characters, and it's just like, it's really interesting that the like but it feels effortless, like you don't notice it's happening until you sit back and you think, oh hey, like that actually was it. Like it's not doing that thing that sometimes I think books, when they're trying to like do the thing, they're like, do you see I'm doing the thing, give me the brownie points.
There's no discussion where they're like, it's interesting that the denizens are all, equality when it comes to the people in them. It's just like, no, that is just a thing, and it continues. He's never like, oh, God is a woman. It's like, no, the architect is a woman. They use the she pronoun. They actually never say she's a female. They just use female pronouns for her. And so like, yeah, I thought that was. As a kid, I really liked that. Or I didn't really I liked it, and I was like, oh, that's challenging to my worldview, because, you as a kid really do just vibe off of what society tells you.
I liked it. I was like,
I think I grew to like it more as I read the books, because I was like, oh, and the other thing to me is it feels very like the world is real and not like the author is catering to themselves when you have something like that, where it's like, okay, this is not wish fulfillment. This is the author putting thought into the world and doing something that they think is good for their readers and for the world, and not because like, oh, yeah, it's like that thing where, well, no, I won't go into that because that's kind of dark and we're talking about children's books. But anyway, that was one element I really liked about his previous series, the Aeneir book, the Seventh Tower books, which only have 6 books, and that has always frustrated me to no end.
really?
Yes, there's 6 books, but it's named The Seventh Tower. I don't understand. It's bothered me so much since I was a child. And actually, to be fair, I feel like, coming back to this series, that one of the problems with this series is that it actually probably should have been 6 books, in terms of, I think he runs out of things to do a little bit in the last 3. And so like he kind of has to stretch things, and so all of a sudden Leaf has way more of a point of view, who was like a secondary character in the first couple books. Here has like, she's almost most of the POV in book 7. And Arthur doesn't really do anything almost for all of book 7. So I was like, it might have been better if he had just kept it to 6, but that would have bothered me. So
Yeah, it would have. And I think there are ways that could have been fixed. And just, I think if you gave Arthur a more active storyline, it's just really interesting because, like I said, I think this half, and you said in the first video we did that you thought this half was the weaker half, and I do agree with that. Though I'll argue that some of I liked one of the books here better than some of the ones in the first one. But I think it's different for you. But it just was so fun. It just was fun. I wasn't dragging my feet. It was easy. It was simple. It was a good adventure. The side characters, the different world. It was just a real heckin' good time.
Yeah, the one thing I think I will say is that some of the problems in the last book become because thematically he hasn't built up a lot. And so, like, when it comes to, like,
It's not.
satisfying character actions and choices build from the themes and the character development that has come before. And so if you don't have that, then the character actions kind of feel like a little arbitrary, and there's not really like questions to answer. And I think that's one of the reasons the last book felt kind of weak to me in certain ways, and specifically the ending. When I was a child, I really hated the ending to this series, and as an adult, I'm more okay with it. I think it's like, I think it could have done more interesting things. And more than anything, I'm bothered. I think what's weak is how the events leading up to the actual ending happen. Like the climax of a lot of the plot lines, I think is a little bit lazy, and then the actual ending is more or less okay. But because you hated my synopsis last time of the premise of this world, why don't you tell our viewers what the premise of the world is?
This book series is about a universe similar to our own, where there is an Earth similar to our own, but with different technologies. But surrounding the planets and stars and cosmos and different like dimensions, there is the house, which is a almost like
Celestial bureaucracy.
celestial bureaucracy. It is it was created, so there is an architect. She created the world, the universe, and then she also created the house, which she created to be a celestial bureaucracy to observe the actual universe and going on. And basically the idea is she created like the universe, and then life developed on its own, and she's fascinated by watching it, so she creates the celestial bureaucracy to watch it. And she then disappears and leaves a will of her will of what needs to be done, and her trustees, who are in charge of her realms while she's gone, are like, no, we're not going to do that. And they end up becoming corrupt, and it causes like the house to like fall. The house is the celestial bureaucracy, and things aren't going good. Enter Arthur Penhaligon, a young human boy at the age of, he's 13?
I think so. He's real
12?
young.
12, 13, that age. And he is approached by an escaped piece of the will who's like, you are now the heir to the architect's will, and you need to collect all the different keys to the kingdom. That's the title of the series.
She said the thing.
And there are 7 trustees, and they each hold domain over a day of the week. So they're Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and you need to go into each of their realms, deal with them, find the new piece of the will, get a key, and then go on to the next one, baby. And how the series starts is Arthur is at first he's like roped into it, and he's willing to comply because the house, when people from the house come into our world, they call it the secondary realms, they are inimicable to life.
I think that's how you pronounce that. We both have English degrees, and I'm going to say that that's how it's pronounced.
And so they, like, just a creature of the house with power coming into Earth will cause problems. And so when Monday originally came to Earth to give Arthur the key, because the will tricked him, he caused a plague that put people to sleep, and they couldn't wake up. And Arthur was like, I'm gonna help you guys because I want to get rid of this plague and save my family and my friends. And then he just keeps getting roped in, and they're like, no, you're kind of the heir. You kind of have to see this through. And he's like, I'll deal with it when I'm 18. Like, let me go live my life. I'll come back. But time flows differently in the house than in the normal realms. And so it's been like 6 months for them in the house, but it had been like 4 minutes for Arthur at home. And he just keeps getting sucked in. And the first 2 books is him really not wanting to do these things, but getting roped into it because the people of the house are interfering with his world. And then the 3rd book is where he finally is like, no, I'm gonna deal with this. I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna fuck shit up, and I'm gonna like, because once it's done, I'll just mosey on back home. But unfortunately, the more he interacts with this world, the more keys he gets, and the more he uses the magic of the house, he is being turned away from mortal into something that is not. The people in the house are called denizens. They are created, and they are not creative because they didn't develop organically from the original matter that the architect created. They have no creation instincts. They're very rigid in their thinking. They have distinct roles. They're not very fluid.
They're almost like very friendly robots, like very like chipper British robots in certain way. In terms of, they don't act like robots, but they do have that kind of like simplicity of, they can't create, they can't, like Marie was saying, all those things.
They have, and most of them have a function, and they like to be within that function, and to go outside of it is a little uncomfortable for them. But Arthur is beginning to become something that is not denizen exactly, because he still has the creativity of humanity, but he's becoming not human. And a huge thing for him as the series goes on is wanting to retain his humanity And so there are two solid books where he is actively trying not to use the powers of magic, and at the expense sometimes of himself or other people around him, because he won't do the thing that would save people. And in this last arc, he finally accepts, no, I started this, I gotta see it through, we'll figure it out later. And he kind of accepts it. And so it's him dealing with like the loss of his humanity, as he collects more pieces of the architect's will, because in each of the realms, the trustees have hidden and locked away a piece of the will, and as he releases them, they smush together and become a part of this lady, Dame Primus, who was the original piece of the will, and then the second, and so on. And the more pieces she gets, the more her personality kind of changes, and she starts out as a solid, like, good guy, and then as it goes on, you're like, Dave Primus, you're kind of mean, and you're using your power sometimes in ways that we don't like. Like, we don't like it, Dave Primus. Um, and he develops like a host of friends who help him, and there are three characters specifically that are kind of enigmas to the rest of the house, because they were the children of the architect and this guy named the Old
Yeah, we
One.
should explain that in the cosmology of this universe, the architect created the world, or the universe, the secondary realms, from nothing. And one of the things I love the most about the series, because it's just so funny, is like, when they want to create magic, they want to create something new, they have to draw from nothing, but nothing is also sort of this poisonous acid like creation. And I just love that idea that, yes, like, a god said, let there be light, he created something from nothing, and it's like, no, nothing is literally capitalized as nothing, a source. And I just, that was one of the things that I love the world building in this world. It goes so hard, it gives cool ideas, it takes a ridiculous premise and then like builds off of it in a way that's really creative and imaginative. But yeah, in the cosmology, the architect created the secondary realms, and then she split herself into a second person called the Old One, who is kind of a basically Prometheus, and she eventually didn't like what he was doing, so she chained him at the bottom of the house, with like, in a way that like just cannot be broken. This will come into play later. Remember it, guys. Chekhov's gun.
Store that away.
But before that, she and the Old One had three children. They had the Mariner, who we've met before and is an ally of Arthur, who's just like the old man of the sea. He has like one, he can come help out if he gets called on his conch shell like three times. There's the Piper, who is like the Pied Piper. There's the Piper's children, which he brought to the house, and now they're sort of in between a person and a denizen, and they're stuck there. He also has the raised rats, who are like intelligent rats, because that's the whole Pied Piper story. And he became a villain in part 4, where he came out, he had been cast into nothing, and he kind of came out after having been like destroyed, and his face was weird, and he created the new Nithlings, which are like between a Nithling, which is a creature of nothing, and a person. They're like more human than the denizens. And then there's Lord Sunday, who up until this point we've never met or heard. He's just up there in the incomparable gardens, which I thought was so funny. Incomparable gardens, because it's never mentioned like, hey, this is the garden, that even Adam fell out of, but it's just mentioned as a garden, and then like what defends it are like these big bugs and stuff. And I love that he took this idea and extrapolated it.
And it's so good because like the architect like appeared in the garden, like she made the garden first, and then she made the Old One out of herself. And so it's just, I love how it plays with like Christian slash Judeo-Christian imagery, but it turns it on its head and uses it for its purposes in really interesting ways. Like, it's not Adam, like God doesn't make Eve out of Adam's rib.
That's one of the fun things about the book, is that Arthur doesn't really know anything about Judeo-Christianity.
He's never like, wow, like Jesus.
Yeah, in the very first book, there's a part where he's like, he never really paid attention to that, and so he asks the Will, like, hey, is there an afterlife? And the Will's like, I don't know, I don't think so. And like after that, it's just like fun little things you mention, which I think part of it is like, it's it's a book for middle schoolers. I don't think he wanted to get too religious with it.
The funny thing is, nobody talks about religion at all. Like it's not like you see evidences of Christianity in the way the book in the real world is talked about, like, at all. And so it's really interesting to think like, so I wonder if the idea was, I'm just not going to engage with that, or this is a world where there isn't this really set specific Judeo-Christian
That's a
religion.
good point because this isn't our world. It's like it's very subtle and you may not pick up on it, but at one point he mentions like his mother's reading a paper and then she switches off the screen of the paper and you're like, "Oh, that's interesting," or
And
holograms.
like as she changes, the page pops up, and there's a point where to watch the TV, Leaf has to sync with the TV and then she can see what's happening, but like she has to like, and so she's able to turn it on without like, she just like
Mhm.
motions in the air and waves her hand. And then Arthur has a cast that like will build up around him, and as he heals will just come off on its
Uh-huh.
own. And just like there's these subtle hints at technology that we don't have, that doesn't exist, but in a world that feels very much like ours in the like 80s, or no, the 90s, early
It's something
2000s.
that I think as a like kids wouldn't pick up on, but you as a, like the older readers would kind of pick up on it, and I think that's like always kind of a cool thing when children's authors can do that, like create on two different levels. And the other thing is that like the going back to nobody is ever like, oh, the architect like God, is that like it fits the tone of the book in a more realistic tone. This would not work. You would be like, why are people not thinking this? But in terms of like the distance tone and the fact that this is a little bit more of a just a little bit less realistic in that way that some books are, then it kind of fits and it allows him to do fun things with it without having to constantly be like, and that's where the original myth came from.
And it's just, and I think it worked so well, and it's so smart because it's not impacting the story, like Will said, negatively by like, I think it would muddy the waters, honestly,
Yeah.
like hard. But you as the reader get to be like,
Oh.
wink, wink. I see what you did there, Nix. Look at you. And it's just, it's really interesting because I think it's just a solid series for kids. Like and the thing is, please note, I'm 30 and I enjoyed the absolute crap out of it.
This is probably one of the best books we've read so far, and definitely this
Yeah.
year. Like it's so solid. It's interesting because again, I think part of it is just Garth Nix is a really good writer, and it matches really well with his style. There are just certain writers who are masterful in a way that others aren't. And like what Garth Nix was like that from like the beginning. Like Sabriel also was like early on in his career, and it's really good.
He came out with a bang.
Yeah, it's something that I remember people talking about with These Violent Delights, which was like a book talk book for a while of the month, by Chloe Gong, and somebody in a Twitter thing was talking about like, yeah, the problem is these authors are getting pushed out real young because they, to be in our current economic circumstances, you don't have 10 years to sit on your work and get better. You need to come out of the gate if you want to be an author.
Did you know Poppy War was written when she was 19 and then it got published when she was 22? R.F.
That
Kong.
makes so much sense. Like, and for a 19-year-old, that's actually quite a good book. Like for a
Yeah,
19-year-old.
when you think about it in retrospect, the fact that she was not, and even for a 22-year-old, I think that is like I don't like that book. It's not a book I enjoyed personally, but in retrospect, I'm way more impressed knowing that she wrote it when she was 19 and then it got published when she was 22. You know? Like, that's wildly young. That is wildly young. It's
If it was a fanfic, I would be like, oh, that's a really good fanfic. Like that's good for what it's doing.
Yeah.
No, that's true. That is maybe sometimes the downside. I've talked before about how on this channel I don't like to look up anything about the book besides what the text is. So like that's maybe sometimes a bit of a downside to doing that, is you don't necessarily aren't able to place the book in its time. But I also think the text stands alone. When we're all dust and ashes, the text will remain. Somebody the other day was talking about how weird it is that in 100 years, everyone we know will be dead and strangers will be living in our houses. So just to depress everybody a little bit. Anyway, back to the book. We start with, in this book, so we already went through Mr. Monday, Grim Tuesday, Drowned Wednesday, and then Sir Thursday were the four. And then we start with, and basically, again, the form of these novels is somehow he gets sent to the new realm, the realm of the next trustee, and he's lost all his powers video game style and has to start building them up again. And then he kind of has to sneak around and find the will, and after he finds wherever the will has been hidden, he gets to find the key. He challenges the trustee for the key. And he has two main friends that help him out. Leaf, who is a girl from his world, who really, really should have been one of his family members, but isn't. We talked last time about how that would have just really helped ground his character instead of just being some rando he knows.
Also making the ending so much more impactful.
Yes, so much more. And then he also knows Susie Turquoise, because they pronounce it turquoise blue, who is like a Dickensian ragamuffin who was one of the Piper's children. So she's been in the house, stuck in the house since the the Black Plague, and she like wears funny hats and has a funny accent and is very spunky. She was one of my favorite characters growing up, and I hate the voice the narrator does for her. I otherwise like his voices, but I hate the Hep voice. A lot they spend a lot of, so Leaf usually has some kind of a B plot that with like the house is working in the real world and is trying to destroy things there, and like usually it's kind of boring. I like, it's just like, it's not bad, but like the house is so cool, and that's where the main plot and stakes are, that I don't really care about her being back in the real world.
The best B plot she had the entire series was in Sir Thursday, where there was the skinless boy infecting people in the hospital and trying to infect as many people as possible to kind of wipe Arthur's presence out of existence. And she had to go find its like the piece it was using to be Arthur, and then like have to get it back into the house so it can be destroyed. Like what a great. It was great. It was creepy. The skinless boy had people like hobbling around the hospital chasing her. It was great. The tension, she was high. And then she gets infected and she has to race against the clock.
There's a cool old lady who's actually really funny.
And it's just really, it's the best B plot. And I would say like the book tries really hard in Friday, which is the next book that we read and we didn't talk about last time, to give her an interesting B plot, because for the first time Leaf is not on Earth, and she's not in the house either. She's on a different planet within the secondary realms, which is our universe, and it just doesn't come together as much. And I'm going to argue that Friday is the weakest. As much as I like some of the stuff that Arthur goes through, like I like the journey through the middle house, and I think that's interesting, but I argue that Friday is the weakest trustee, and that B plot is such a weak B plot, and I think it's because Garth Nix could not engage with pleasure as a cardinal sin in any meaningful way, because this is a children's story. I was sitting there and I was like, what the fuck is Friday? Like, there was literally a point and I was like, is she envy? Is like, what is this? Like, I don't understand. And then after I read Saturday, I was like, is she supposed to be pleasure? Is she supposed to be sex? Like, what?
Yeah, because each of the trustees have one of the cardinal sins, and hers is lust. But again, this is for middle schoolers, so she just likes to experience people's memories. And I don't love lust being a female. Like, this is the one place where I'm like, I just switch that for a male because of whatever. But like, yeah, no.
But it just didn't read. It was so like, it was like an amorphous thing. Like, it just doesn't work. And
yes, no, and also his anger issues in this book are real dumb. So he goes in, he starts, I actually thought the B plot Nix was realizing were dumb, because at the beginning of book of Friday, right, he goes back home. No, that's the beginning of book.
No, you're thinking of
yes,
Saturday.
You're right. No,
that's
you're
where
right.
He has the anger issue. So at the beginning of this book, Leaf wakes up. She had been, well, no. So at the end of Thursday, Leaf wakes up in a hospital and she's throwing up all of the like fungus that she was being mind controlled by the skinless boy. It's a terrible scene, and she's literally like vomiting it up like through her, like it's terrible. And then the doctor, one of the nurses is like, we're dealing with all of this. They've got the other stuff going on at the general hospital. This is Friday's hospital, and Dr. Friday is coming. And Leaf's like, bitch, who? And the nurse is like, yes, her name is Lady Friday, or she's Dr. Friday, but we call her Lady Friday. And Leaf's like, oh no. And then they're like, and she's coming to the hospital. And that's how Thursday ends. And so when it opens in Friday, Leaf is in this hospital, and a lot of people, like it's all older people, like she's the only young person there, which some of the people working there think is weird. But at one day at night, like as she's sleeping, a bunch of the old people get up but they're still asleep, and they're being enchanted down a hallway to a different room. And Lady Friday comes and convinces them all to go into this pool. And like there was this one nurse who was like, you can't be awake. If you're awake, they're going to do stuff. You need to pretend to be asleep. You need to pretend to do all of this stuff. And Leaf was going to just run away, but then she realizes her Aunt Mango, who is kind of an older lady who she loves dearly, is there and is one of these sleepers. And basically, Friday has this hospital where she takes old people and she transports them to this other world in the secondary realms. It's her hideout. And she experiences them. And the problem is, for the first half of I'd say the first third of the book, you're not really sure what experiencing is. But it doesn't sound good. It sounds like this scary thing, and it ends up not being as scary as it should have. Like, it really should have. This book suffers because it builds up a lot of like kind of fear around this thing, and then it ends up being, and not that it isn't horrifying, but it's a little toothless in its terror. And also I found her hideout on the secondary realm. She's like built this like. It's so boring. It's basically, she's made like this circular base, and each level is a different level, but it's circular, and each room is a clock time. So it's like you're at 9 o'clock, you're at 9:15, and there's all these different rooms, and you have to also go up. And then outside, it's on this like weird alien planet that has almost like a purple sky, and there are these seed monsters that if they get in, they'll kill you, and they've got like tentacles and like and unfortunately it just isn't as engaging. And I found Friday's world a little, I'm gonna make this argument with Friday and Saturday. I think Will liked Saturday's Tower more than I did, but I find them both a little barren, like just in vibe.
No, I'm with you. I like the idea of Saturday's Tower, but actually as an environment, it's kind of boring. And we're also not there for very long. We'll talk about it more in Saturday. But compared to like the drowned house of Wednesday, that was so cool, where you have a bunch of office apartments now or office cubicles now having to be a ship, or Grim Tuesday, where they had like the weird creepy mine he was in, or Sir Thursday and the maze that was shifting. So cool.
So a huge thing that makes these books work is the conceit of the new realm you have to go in, how strong it is. So I would say the setting of Thursday, the maze itself is really interesting in concept. It's not very vivid, but it's an interesting concept, and the military aspect of it makes up for it. There's an engagement there because of the characters.
Yes, the culture of the people there in the environment is very cool.
Versus like Wednesday, which was like the environment was very vivid. The idea of Wednesday as the Leviathan in the waters was very terrifying. And it was just like you were in these different like beach locales that like were interesting and also well described. Similar, I think Tuesday, like you said, is a very strong location. I would say Monday is a weaker one.
Oh, I can't even remember. But it's also the first time you're encountering the house.
Buildings,
and
yeah.
So you're like, so that's cool in its own right. Well, but also there were moments in it. So like they go through the Improbable Staring book in Monday. And so like that's cool. Or in Tuesday, they had that little sun world that was in its own thing. And so that also was a cool setting. Whereas here, it's just like, it's kind of a creepy. And like, he's not bad at doing creepy, but it's just not as interesting as some of the other places. And the other thing is, it feels like it's almost lacking a theme, because actual Friday's world is where they do all the writing and stuff. And so like there's like
and bookbinding.
Yeah, and so like there's a river of words, and you have to wear like a suit with words on it, so that if you fall down, you'll be caught by the currents. And I was like, that's just not super cool. Like if the whole thing was a bunch of book presses maybe that were shutting down, and you had to go, I don't know, like just something like a little bit weirder would have been nice than just a snowy place.
And it has 3 levels to it. Like there's the snowy place, and then they go up more, and then it's like hot and like the weather's broken, but it doesn't have a solid, like I didn't get what the setting was. Like it wasn't a setting, it was just a place where people bound books within like some wasteland. It felt like, when you're a video game and there's like those areas that you're not actually supposed to spend a lot of time in, and they're not very fleshed out, and it's like kind of flat, and there's like maybe one tree over there, and then you just keep walking, and then like a tree.
The asses haven't all loaded in yet.
Yeah. and that's how Friday felt. I liked some of what happened. Like I liked the interaction with the guys on the river, the Word River, and then some of the other stuff that happened, like the Gilded Youths, and so it has interesting. And I like the part where they end up in the book press, like the
That
giant
was
book
dope.
press, and so there's little moments, but the setting is just very vague in this one, and the B plot suffers because like it's Leaf, and she's in the secondary realm, and she has to help this guy who helps. He has to turn like once Friday takes people from the hospital on Earth to this world. They like lay in beds, and there's a guy who works there who was originally from Earth, who has been not in Earth for like 15 years. And he has to turn their bodies and then prep them to be transported out to this lake. And then Friday sits above them on this chair and then just sucks their good memories out of their faces and then eats them. And then they're not dead, but they don't have most of themselves. And then their bad memories go to all the denizens in Friday to experience. And so there's this big thing about, and it's why having it be lust, like he really should have thought about this before he decided to stick to this, because it just doesn't work, because it doesn't feel like lust, it feels like escapism.
Yeah, it just doesn't, it doesn't quite match. And the thing is, conceptually, it's interesting because the book doesn't lean on this enough. But the whole thing is that the house is just supposed to record the secondary realms. It is not supposed to interfere into them. And it's really kind of an interesting idea that, like, no, the problem with the house now is that it's beginning to try to influence the secondary worlds. And one of the things it likes about it is that it can give them experiences that they wouldn't have. So it's almost like a predatory thing. And this could have been a nice moment for Arthur to be like, oh, this is one of the reasons I have to take control of the house and get it back to doing what it was doing. But that doesn't really happen. And you're right, it's not really lust. It's just kind of, it's almost more like envy, but like, or gluttony.
It is. I thought she was envy. I literally thought she was envy, and she was jealous of the experiences of humans. And so all she did was experience things she couldn't have herself and take it from the people who had it. You know, like, and so I legit thought she was envy. And then we started Saturday, and I was like, the fuck this? Because Saturday is actually envy. And it really felt like escapism, or like disengagement from your world, which is an interesting concept, because there are like some of her denizens that work there for 20 years. They're just going to experience, and they don't even get to experience the good stuff. They just get to experience like the mediocre, like but they choose to do that for 20 years and just experience the mediocre parts of humanity from other people's lives. And they've got like a long thing down their face, and it's stapled to their forehead while they're experiencing. And so it really feels like, I mean, and it could have been a great commentary for like getting engaged so hard with like social media. Now, granted, I think at the time that he wrote this, social media was barely existent. But yeah, as I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, this is what a lot of people do, where they just scroll and experience other people's lives through the like little
That is
thing
interesting,
they hold
actually.
in their hands. And so it's great, but I am applying that new layer onto it and it's like, and so I really think this is the one book where having to sit with the seven deadly sins really hurt, because Friday is just, bleh. She's one of the least memorable, like hands down.
The thing is, this is also one of the books where he tries to do a switch up. Where he tries to change the plot formula and twist it a little bit, because the plot formula is Arthur he gets dragged into the trustee's realm for some reason, has to find the will, then has to go for the key. And in this one, the whole thing is that it starts with Friday saying, hey, I'm abdicating. Any of the three people who want it can get my key now. And so like that's supposed to be a bit of a mix up, but it also makes Friday feel real not there.
It does. And she shows up like twice. And they're very like brief scenes, and like the one scene where she like, there's two scenes early on where she shows up, and like one is just to come in and like tell the sleepers to like get into a pool, and then there's another one where like she just experiences people and then fucks off. And so you really don't get to experience Friday until the end. And one of the benefits of the other books, like we get Grim Tuesday from the start, you know, and we get an actual scene with him talking with someone from the upper house from Saturday's realm. And same with Sir Thursday. He feels like an actual character, and there's like simplicity to his anger and his like
He's
uh
weirdly scary for being such a normal, like he like, you know, all the denizens as they get more powerful become taller and better looking, and he's actually a little bit short for one of them and weird looking, and so there is an anger there. And especially with the way the voice actor is hilarious, because when he wants to do really evil characters, he makes them American. Like Sir Thursday doesn't have a British accent, and Sunday also doesn't have a British accent. It's really funny.
It's also funny that the will, the last piece of the will is Australian.
Yeah, for no reason. I was like, why?
I think he was just running out of voices. He did. This book series was very long. There's a lot of characters. I think he was like, nope, I can't do that one, because unfortunately, I think voice actors are like limited. Like, there's only so many things that they can do, and so he was like, well, I guess this one's gonna be Australian. I've never whipped that guy out.
The thing is that once you start, it's a common thing with quality, which is like if you start making something look detailed, all of a sudden all the other things around it look undetailed if they're not of the same level of detail. And so there's a problem sometimes where if you create like one good asset in a game, all of a sudden you have to redo all the other assets to be to that level. And so because he does so many good voices, it would feel weird if he did just a normal voice for such an important character. And so yeah, I think he was just like, well, I can do Australian. I thought it was more Cockney, but you're right, it's more Australian, I think.
Yeah, it was very interesting. But yeah, and so I think Friday by far is the weakest, and I mean, he defeats Friday, he gets the key. This is the book where he decides to keep one of the keys.
So there are actually some kind of interesting character things going on, and by interesting I mean interesting to talk about, not to read. So he at this point starts having anger issues where he starts thinking like, oh, I'm like a
No, it's
no,
Saturday. That only
it
happens on
starts no, it
Saturday.
starts in Friday because he gets it from the key. He starts being more angry, remember, because he fights the people at the beginning. He accidentally kills one. It's because what happens is that this is not mentioned until Sunday, which is kind of a problem. But the keys themselves kind of twist the trustees to have their sin. So Thursday was mad all the time because he had that key. So because Arthur has that key, he starts getting like a little bit more. It starts slower here, and I didn't like
Yeah.
it because it feels like in Harry Potter, when Harry Potter just started using all caps and exclamation points after book 4 to explain his trauma.
Oh, you mean when we got angst Harry? Hashtag angst
Yes,
Harry.
exactly. And so like here it didn't feel like it integrated well with his character. It felt like just an add-on. And I was like, I kind of get what's going on here. He's losing his humanity. That's going to be the next like arc. But I didn't feel like it worked great. I think that's also one of the reasons these three feel different than the first 4 is because he is more powerful in these. He is more confident. He is more able to do things where he really was just a scrappy kid with a good heart in the first 4.
He still in this book is trying not to use the key. Is only at the end of this book that he's like, no, I just have to fucking use them, and I'm just not gonna look. Dr. Scamandros, who's a character that he meets in Wednesday and is a sorcerer, gives him a ring that will show him however much gold is on the ring is how much of a denizen or how uh, um, affected by
Yeah, he
sorcery.
becomes a
Yeah.
denizen when he uses one of the keys. He becomes more and more. And once he reaches a certain point, it won't recede and he can't go
He
back.
can't go
Yeah.
back. He's still fighting that. So a lot of this book is him just not using the keys when he could or should. And there's a point at which Susie kind of almost tricks him into using it to free her. And this is one of those moments where it's like legit upsetness that she like manipulated him like that, and she's not taking seriously his, because like a lot of people in the house just don't take his want to be human seriously. They're like, really, we're still having this conversation? Dame Primus, numero uno on that list. And this is also where you start to see Dame Primus really kind of using her, like she tries to intimidate Arthur at one point, and is like with her eyes, and he's like, oh shit, like I have to be careful. but he chooses to keep a key going into this. And he goes, the actual adventures aren't as important. The character beat that Will mentioned is
There's also, this is the book that made me realize that Nix is really good with secondary characters who only show up for like 3 scenes. So, for example, in this we get one of the new Nithlings, who's like, it's funny because he's a big guy. He's got like 7 fingers and a third eye, and yet he talks in kind of a voice like this, and he speaks in like a Shakespearean way. And you're like, oh, this is actually he's so
sweet.
nice, yeah. And you really like him. And then like he's gone by the end of the book, or there's they're on the raft at one point with, oh, I forget what his name is, but he's a member of like a club there.
He's a member of the guild,
Uh-huh.
the book, like the people who channel stuff up and down the water. And he was great. He was such a funny
That's the thing,
character.
yeah, and that's the thing with Nyx is that, and that's one of the reasons this book works, is every character we run into is kind of fun, even if they only show up for a little bit, where I think another author would have the problem that, like, you're meeting a ton of new characters and none of them are actually that interesting. Or, like, I really liked the captain in Drowned Wednesday, who after Drowned Wednesday is just not around anymore. Like, he doesn't have any dialogue.
And then there's also, yeah, Sunscorch. He shows up briefly at the end of Thursday, and but then like that's the last time he has dialogue. But even the group of Wednesday's night
Oh,
people,
yeah. They were really cool.
they're denizens that fly and they wear these masks and they use sign language. They don't speak, and it's really interesting because they're like elite warriors, but they don't speak, and so they speak with sign language. And it was just a really fantastic use of something that most people only think of being used for like like the deaf slash hard of hearing community, and to see it get used in this, like, for this group of really cool warrior people who have like a lair that you have to go to,
And it makes them very distinctive
it was
because
just
it's
really
like a little
interesting.
community within it. And again, that's one of the cool things about the worlds, is exploring these different things. And their lair actually contains the will within it. And it's funny because the will in Friday and Saturday, I really liked his characters, and then they get eaten by Dame Primus essentially. And like they're sometimes, because sometimes the will is helpful and sometimes it isn't in its component parts. But then when they combine to Dame Primus, they tend to be bad, which I think thematically more could have been done with, in terms of like, for some reason good components go into, but when added up, these good components become a bad person.
See, I would have liked it so much more if she became more nuanced and less obvious. Like after Thursday, she's obviously like more ragey and obviously bad, but then she got Saturday, or she gets Friday and Saturday and is a little bit more chill, and Arthur is at ease, like, she's calmed down, and I think that would have been a nice, like, nuanced take, that because like I think the idea of what she's going to ultimately culminate to can still be laid out fairly well, but also have her becoming nuanced. And just because somebody like gets a more nuanced thing and seems better on the outside doesn't mean like those bad parts aren't still in there. And so I wish it was tackled, like I wanted her to act differently a little bit after the additions of these other two, because like there's literally a part where the Friday's will is like, oh, sounds like my combined other selves need some tempering. That's me, baby. And I was like, great, I'm so interested to see how this affects Dame. And it didn't. It didn't. No effect.
You're right. She's a very kind of unnuanced character in that she does like the one thing, and that's fine, but it would have been interesting to have more of like, yeah, she changes based off of what she's in. She actually at one point has to split into 2 people, which is like very funny. And what's funny is she doesn't change into Dame Primus and Dame Secundus. She changes into 2 versions that add up the different parts of the will to be different numbers. And Scamandrous is like, of course she would pick something that gives her a higher number. I just thought that was like funny.
Yeah, it's Dame Quattro and Dame
7, I think.
Cincto? No, because she had 7 no,
You're
she didn't have
right,
7
yeah.
keys. It was 4 and 5, or 3 and 4. Yeah, it was 3 and 4 because she had 5 keys at the time. Yeah, because it's at the start of the, yeah. That's what it
Yeah,
was.
no, you're right. Yeah, I think you're correct. And so, like, I thought that was funny. But yeah, there's nothing really big that happens in Friday. Well, okay, so the ending of Friday is kind of interesting in that the main person that he actually faces off against is the Piper, who also is looking for the key so that he can become the keys to the kingdom, the heir. And like, it's the Piper is an interesting character because he's mentioned as been liking humans a lot and he's better to them, and now he's sort of like this weird like he wears a mask because under it you get the assumption that his face has just been horribly scarred by being in a sea of nothing. And he's made the new Nithlings, but the new Nithlings like mostly just want to farm, and he's making them work in their army, and so like they have to do what he says, and but like he doesn't respect them, and so he makes for a good villain in a way that like the other trustees really aren't. And like that character we mentioned, I forget his name, that we'd been knowing throughout the whole book, who was a new Nifling and we liked, like gives his life because the Piper tells him to, and it's like, oh, that really it hits. Even though he wasn't like, even though again the books are sort of distanced in tone.
It is sad because like everyone's like, fight it, don't listen, but there is a sense that like the new Nithlings know that like they owe them their creation to him, and so they'll listen, and it feels less like being forced to listen than they're just choosing to do so. And so when that character, again, I'm so sad I've forgotten his name.
It's like Chomsky or something.
No.
I thought maybe me saying something kind of close would spark you to remember. I know it's not Chomsky, but it's something like that.
When he does choose to listen to the Piper and die, he leaves behind a note for Arthur's benefit. And so it shows you that like he chose to do this thing because he felt he owed his life to the Piper, but he also had enough free will to kind of defy him and leave Arthur a clue, which is basically that Sunday is choosing to stay out of the affairs of everything, so that in that moment you realize that almost everything that has been happening has been Saturday's work. The person who was down in book 2 trying to bring the nothing into the house and destroy, because in book 2 when you realize that somebody's trying to break down the wall, like the mines, to let all the nothing in, you're like, why would anybody do that? Like, what is the reason here? And you realize it's Saturday. We don't know the reason yet, but you realize that this has all been Saturday. Saturday's the one who made the skinless boy and all of that stuff, and Sunday is distant and not engaging with anything, and so it sets up this really interesting dynamic at the end of Friday. And I would say the end of Friday is like the best part of it. Again, I just overall think it's like one of the weaker books.
No, I agree. I think you're right. It's not spoilers for the tier list at the end, but I think it's going to be at the bottom. Even though, again, I really liked, again, that Nithling character whose name we don't know. They're the newness, I think they're called. I think Garth Nix is just very talented in that way. It's a nice character. I like that we were around with Fred and Susie, and that was kind of fun. But it doesn't quite come together. And so, yeah, starting Saturday, we realized that, because usually there's always a prologue having to deal with one of the trustees and what weird plan they're up to. And then there's an epilogue that's like a hint for later. But in this one, in the prologue for Saturday, we see that, so Lord Sunday lives in the incomparable gardens, which is the first place God created, or the architect created, right? And he is one of the architect's children. But for Saturday, Superior Saturday, was the first being that the architect ever created. And so she feels slighted that Sunday gets to be in the gardens. And the thing is, the gardens are built on the branches of a tree called a Yggdrasil, which is a shout out to Norse mythology, or Drusil. I think I don't know.
The Drazel,
basically,
Drazel
that's what they
trees.
call them, right? And they are growing at a certain rate constantly. So she is building a tower to constantly try to catch up to get to the bottom of it, but she can't. She's never been able to reach it. So we realize that this plan, this whole time, is that she is poisoning the roots of the Drazels with nothing to kill them, and so that it will stop growing so fast. But in doing so, she basically has to destroy the foundations of the house, which will destroy the entire house, but she'll be able to reach the incomparable gardens before that happens.
And in the incomparable gardens, you'll be safe. Like, you won't be affected by the nothing, in theory.
Mm-hmm. But the entire secondary realms might also be destroyed doing this. And like, as a character motivation, I really like it. It's like, because her whole thing is envy, so it's like I like it as an idea. I think the problem is that it doesn't really come to an interesting culmination in Sunday, which we'll talk about.
I think part of the issue for me why it's not as strong, because like as an idea, that she has lived with this envy for so long, and she's been building and building and building this giant ass fucking tower for so long, and eventually she gets to the point where like the only way to get what I want is to burn it all. Like, that's such an interesting dynamic, because you get the idea that this wasn't always her plan. This wasn't always what she was just like, if we build faster, we'll get there, you know? And then eventually it was like, no, I have to slow the progress of the trees. There's no way we can catch up. And so it's a really drastic move. But unfortunately, Saturday also suffers by not being on screen enough. Like, she is not.
Yeah, and it's going to get worse.
She's equally as, like, not a character as Friday is. Like, I really miss the strong. I mean, even Monday was a really strong. Like, you knew what his shtick was, you knew, and again, it was Sloth, so it's very easy to, like, show that, and it's just like the weaker of one of the weaker ones.
And the thing is, Saturday will end with a cliffhanger where he doesn't face off against Saturday, and then in Sunday she's a nothing character because she's lost one of the keys and is no longer powerful and able to think on her own. And so the main villain, which is Saturday, basically never gets confronted in the book or faced down. And so it's like, that's one of the reasons I think the ending doesn't really work with all the culmination of the plot lines.
I think part of it was that Nix built Saturday up to be too powerful, and you can't actually have a showdown with Saturday. Because the other part of Saturday's shtick is, not only is she building this giant tower, but she employs hundreds of thousands of sorcerers. This is the part of the house where sorcerers go to school and they become sorcerers, and they're either sorcerer supernumeraries. Oh god, what are her other ones? The like artful loungers.
Oh yeah, each of the trustees has like a secret police type people who follow their noon and Monday or dusk or whatever. And yeah, hers are called artful loungers. We didn't mention it, but actually one of the coolest parts of Friday was that one of the flights of them, they were the night people, but then there were also the gilded youths, which are Piper's children who got remade by, I don't know why my camera stopped focusing, that got remade by Tuesday into like automatons, and they actually kind of talk like robots, unlike anything else. And it's like, oh, that's awful, but that's like cherubs.
It's funny because, like, again, the book will throw these terrible concepts at you, but it is distant enough that it'll be a bit more comedic or just distant, because again, if it engaged, like if it really looked the concepts it was dealing with in the fucking face and stared at the reader and was like, it would be too much. It couldn't be a children's book. We'd be fucked.
And she is the best sorcerer. She, again, was the first being created by the architect. Like, it's like, she really should be just like a massive, and her plans have been moving this everything. You know, she has her noon, whatever, and dusk, and like, it just never goes anywhere.
It should have been a really big climax, and then I think I would have been okay with Sunday being the quieter book that it is, because Sunday as a character is built up to be this quiet, uninvolved character, so it would have made sense in that way. But the fact that you don't have the big blowout with Sunday or with Saturday is just really weird. And again, it's because he built, like, she has hundreds of thousands of sorcerers, but she also can use on top of using her keys power, she can tap into them and use them as well, like batteries. So she's almost unfucking stoppable. And so you can't have an actual interaction. And I think he kind of wrote himself into a corner with that one.
I think it could have worked because at this point, by the end of the book, Arthur has 2 of the keys. So maybe he grabs Saturday's key and then she faces off against him with all of her sorcerer. Like, that might have been an even match, maybe. My main problem with the last book is that all these plot threads he's built, and then they should come crashing together in an interesting way, and they don't. They just kind of, he deals with one and then he deals with another and another. They don't really synergize to create something greater, which I'll talk about more in that book. But yeah. And so again, the setting is kind of cool because it is basically just a massive like skyscraper that's just it's not called a chassis. What's it called? Like the structure.
Yeah, it doesn't have walls on the outside, but it has walls on the inside. It's like if you took office cubicle blocks that had no walls and you just shoved them all together.
Yeah, and it's just constantly building, and like there's a big chain system that the Piper's children have to maintain, and like all the cubicles can get moved up and down. Now, the funniest part of the book to me, and it's such a small touch, but I loved it, is because Friday's thing is envy. all of the sorcerers in her employ are kind of petty and shitty to each other. Like as soon as somebody gets a promotion, everybody knows that everybody else is going to start throwing trash at them because they're so mad that they didn't get it. And like even in small moments, they're like really shitty to each other about someone doing good, and it's just such a funny touch.
It is, and the sorcerer supernumeraries, because like their entire job is to kind of stare into mirrors and monitor if magic is being done, and keep the phones and elevators from being used magically. And they're all just so sad and grumpy. The artful loungers are in a little, because they don't have office cubicles with desks, they can lounge and do their stuff. And so they're a little bit better off and like happier, but it's really interesting. And it could have been, and like, I didn't like the Grace Monkeys. Like, I didn't find that particularly
So
engaging.
again, I think Nix was trying to do something a little different in that he's trying to, usually Arthur gets into the setting and immediately starts like making friends with the Piper's children in that place. But in this case, he can't make friends with them because he's reached a point where his motivations and theirs are detaching. And so like that could be like a little bit thorny, but it's not quite done well.
And this is also the book where his anger issues really like he literally feels like somebody else is in his head and he has to control himself. He also has his little yellow elephant so one of the things you learn about in book 3 is that Wednesday, the oceans are where of the Wednesday's realm is where anything lost ends up. And he remembers his little yellow elephant that he loved as a child, but he lost. And he kind of hopes he'll find it. And I forget exactly how it comes back to him, but it ends up coming back to him. And he's very happy to have it. And it's a reminder of his humanity. And it's something that he clings to in this book quite a bit. He has to keep anything magical in Saturday's realm. So first they have to sneak into Saturday's realm because there's no way to get into it. But
we should mention that actually at the beginning of the book, he had gone back with a leaf with all the patients from Friday's realm into the real realm. And then he gets a call from his brother who's in the military, basically being like, hey, the government is tired of all these plagues. They're going to launch a micro nuke against the hospital. And actually he recognizes the name of the general they sent, and it's Saturday trying to mess shit up and destroy everything. So basically they only have like 3 minutes, so he freezes time in the secondary realm in the hospital. And I thought this was Nix going, okay, we're done with these B plots, let's get to the main. And I was like, oh, this is clever, this is a way of making it. No, there's gonna be more of that later. But basically and this point, by the way, again, he's a denizen, he's used up all his power, or he's used so much power, and then he goes back into the house, and we find out that the entire bottom half of the house has been eaten by nothing.
He ends up going to Scamandros, who is in the coal cellar, which is where the old one is.
Oh, so yeah, this is a good scene.
He has a conversation with the old one, hates denizens and will kill them. And Arthur is hoping he's still got a little, because he's still got a bit of mortality in him, and he hopes that's enough. And the old one's like, yeah, that's fine. And they have a conversation. And the old one is younger looking. He's less old. He's not as he doesn't have a beard. He's still
there's
an
a bunch
guy.
of roses growing everywhere. He's killed the cuckoos who would come and kill him. I take his eyes.
Yeah, and peck out his eyes. And so he's slowly like becoming free because of the nothing that has invaded the lower house. And this area, his prison, was supposed to last forever, so it has still withstood the tide of nothing. But like Monday's realm, Tuesday realm, gone. Just it's next. And I should explain that Arthur's able to travel in this because the key from Friday lets him, as long as he can find a reflective surface in a place that he's been before, and he can visualize it, he can end up like traveling through there. That's why Friday was traveling through pools and shit. And he finds Do you want to talk about their conversation a bit
I
more,
can't
Will, that they
actually
had?
remember too. I remember there's a lot of like ominous stuff, and I really liked it, but I can't remember what was actually said because, like, the way I understand the plot of the books is from the viewpoint of like the wiki article essentially, and that I understand the main things that happen, but I don't totally remember when each reveal happens. I think he just tells a little bit more about the architect, why the architect went away, and what's going to happen when the house gets eaten.
It is a cool scene. So him and Scamandros fuck off, and they go to they go to Thursday's realm, which is kind of empty because people have gone to the middle house to deal with this, and basically like shit's going down. And when they finally meet up with Dame Primus, she's like, we need to deal with this is the scene where Arthur makes her split in two because they need two people need to go and shore up the oceans of the house and some other points to make sure it doesn't come into the rest of the house. And Arthur's like, no, I'm gonna go deal with Saturday. I'm going to find a way in. And she's like, how are you gonna do that? Like, and Dame Primus doesn't want him to go do this, but he's like, no, I'm in charge. I'm gonna do this. And she's like, well, who's going to do this? This needs to be done first. And he's like, you're going to split into two. And, like, she doesn't want to do it.
So it's sort of a bit of a power play, and, like, he knows she's kind of... And so, like, that's kind of interesting. I think, again, this is... Part of the thing is, I don't think Nix is quite as strong writing this as he is the others. Like, as an author, he has really interesting strengths and not even weaknesses, but things he's not as good at writing. And this is something where I think, like, there could have been a little bit more of a... something said through their interactions and their relationship. But the thing is, Arthur is such a... And I don't say this to say he's an unengaging character, but he's a bit of a hollow character because, again, there's that distanced tone that you don't quite get. You don't quite get thematic messages through relationships in these books. I think that's the thing, is that you don't really get thematic messages or character development through the relationships. Those happen through actions. And so sometimes that's a bit of a missed opportunity. The book doesn't really tell themes and arcs through relationships, which is kind of just an interesting thing to think about in terms of how that works. But basically the main thing is that he has to sneak into Saturday somehow with Susie. I forget how. They just get in there.
The raised rats send them through a giant bottle.
Oh, yeah. They have like a bottle that automatically changes things. They
a Nebuchadnezzar.
Which is a kind of bottle?
Yeah, it's a giant bottle. Like, bottles have different sizes, and apparently the biggest one is called a Nebuchadnezzar.
Which is so funny. I don't know how, like, before Wikipedia, Nix knew that. And so they get in there again. They have to go in with the Piper's children in that realm, and it doesn't really work as well. They figure out who Arthur is, and they don't really want trouble, so they're just like, okay, we're not gonna... I think it would have been interesting to have a little bit more of an interplay between, like, Arthur realizing, like, oh, I'm not the kid anymore, and that our interests have now diverged from the Piper's children, which usually works out. But, like, again, that's not really how Nix tells his stories.
He also, as a general context, he doesn't look like himself anymore. He's gotten taller, and he's kind of become a little bronzed, and he's just very good looking now. Like, he obviously doesn't look like a Piper's child anymore. And like I said, his anger, like, there's this one point where somebody, like, jokes with him about something, and Arthur, like, nearly chokes him out.
Yeah.
And it's like, how dare you talk to me, weakling? And he has to, like, control himself. And I was explaining this earlier. He can't use the keys or any sorcery within Saturday's realm because Saturday's sorcerer supernumeraries are looking for magic, and if they see magic being used, they will converge upon the point that it was used at. So he basically can't use the keys, can't have them out. They have to go into a special pouch that muffles their magic, their sorcerer signatures. And then in that pouch is also Elephant, which is his little yellow elephant from when he was a little baby, who is kind of becoming the thing that is tying him to his humanity and that he'll think about. And this is going to play into something that happens in the next book. And this is really one of those moments where I wish Nix would have developed a little bit more, because I really like the elephant stuff in book 7. I really, and that it's just my little heart.
It helps that I had an elephant when I was young, a stuffed elephant, so like I kind of got it. And I had an elephant and a yellow blanket, funnily enough, were like the two things I liked as a
Aw.
kid. So like it kind of fit.
I didn't have a yellow elephant, but I did have an elephant named Ellie.
Oh,
Very
I was
good.
gonna say creative.
Yes, I also had a wild dog, Stuffy, whose name was Wild Dog.
Name the thing. It's good.
The only ever creative thing I had was I had a white bear with pink feet named Nunny, and it's because I got that the day I was born, and it was just Nunny.
And it was
Like,
called
that's
that
just what it was
beforehand, so yeah,
called.
you didn't name
Yeah,
it.
but yeah, and I would have liked the elephant to just be a little bit more, because like he thinks about it sometimes, but I wish there was a couple times where he put his hand in the thing and like touched the, like where it was just a little bit more of a grounder throughout this book, and I wish it had come up a bit more in some of the previous books. Because it's going to have a significant thing in the last book.
Unfortunately, halfway through the book, Leaf wakes up, and so the secondary plot starts. And in this one, she's just trying to ferry a bunch of old people into the bottom of the hospital because the nuclear bomb's going to go off. And what's like kind of interesting about it is like they're not able to save everyone, and they're not able to stop the nuclear bomb. And so that's kind of a mix-up of the secondary plots. But like mostly, I was just glad it was pretty short.
Me too, because it's just like it's not. Like, she's not going to be able to get everyone in. And I think he probably could have just done one scene with Leaf and then, like, cut to the end and then just called it good. But the big thing that happens in this is they end up finding the will. And the will is in the water. So one of the things we haven't mentioned is it is constantly raining in Saturday's realm, like just always for the past 10,000 years, which is about how long the architect's been missing.
Oh, interesting.
And what Saturday has done is spread the will over all of the water, and so it is never in the same place all at once. And so Arthur has to find a water reservoir basically and get into it, and then the will is like, okay, call me, so all of my bits will kind of converge on you. So Arthur has to start calling the will, which alerts everyone around him to the fact that he's there because it's sorcery. The will starts converging. Saturday sorcerers unplug the water reservoir, and so Arthur and the will go woo down the drain, and Susie's like, Arthur, and Arthur's like, I should have told Susie to get in the water with me. Why didn't I do that? Because a huge thing that is happening is Arthur feels so confident because of his power and stuff. He sometimes isn't making as many thoughtful decisions as he has in the past. Again, I think this should have been a bit more gradual to work a little bit better, because it does feel a little out of character, and there is a reason, and it's there, and it's immediately explained that he's being affected by the keys and the magic of the house.
Yeah, the thing is, I think Garth Nix has trouble writing those kind of internal interiority to the characters. It's there sometimes. So like at the beginning of Saturday, we didn't mention it, but when he's in the lower house, he's trying to figure out what's going on. There's going to be a wave of nothing crashing on him. So he embraces the power of the keys and builds this golden net to keep it all at bay. And as he does that, he feels himself becoming a denizen. He cries out because are perfecting them. He's getting taller. He feels his bones cracking, and like that's a powerful moment. But like we don't quite get that when it comes to like the emotions. There's almost a thing. It's almost a bit like Mistborn, where it's like Sanderson talks about how like he's just never really had very strong emotions, so his characters don't. And like Nix is much better at writing characters, but it feels a little bit like that at times.
Yeah, and it is in our Sabriel review, our patrons mentioned that it just felt too emotionally distant for them to really emphasize with Sabriel as a character. And Will and I didn't have that, because I think enough of the visual cues of the storytelling and the physicality and like the interactions helped. But it is in moments like this where you see that lack of interiority really begins to affect the kind of development / character arcs that he is trying to accomplish in this. It works in Sabriel because it is a short one-shot story beginning to
And
end.
Sabriel has a little bit more. So, like, I remember when she met Touchstone and she was kind of annoyed that he kept trying to help her and that he wouldn't talk to her because she mostly got him because she likes to talk to people. She brought him back to life. And, like, she had done that also as a way of confirming her power to be like, oh, I need to feel more like myself. So, there actually was more going on there, I think, even if it was still distanced in tone. Like, the work was put in. Whereas in here, it just isn't really. And again, I don't know if that's maybe him trying to write it simpler for an audience of children. But the next big thing that happens is basically there's like Saturday is able to breach the bottom of the Yggdrasil, whatever they're called.
The incomparable gardens, the Drazel trees are beginning to, they're slowing down because of that.
Right, and then, but at the same time, at the bottom of her realm, the Piper and his Nunith army have also started to breach in, and so like there's this really kind of cool race feeling of like these three different factions like bouncing into each other. And I will say, I really felt the atmosphere in these last two books of like, oh shit, the house is turning into nothing. We're all trying to get to this one point. It's intense, and I really liked that. And the book ends basically with Arthur seeing Saturday fighting in the Incomparable Gardens and then him falling off of it. And like he doesn't confront Saturday or get his key or her key or anything like that. No, he gets the key. He just doesn't defeat
Yeah,
her.
no, so he sees, like, Saturday recognizes him, and there's this point where she's calling on a lightning storm to go at him, and while she's queuing that up and she's pulling power from all of her sorcerer supernumeraries, and you're like, this is gonna be the fight, it's gonna happen. He calls the key to him, but the key shoots to him so quickly he falls off the back of the thing and just falls into nothing. Not into nothing, but into like the air.
There's a joke at the end of the book of nothing versus nothing capitalized, and I was like, oh, I get that because I know, but it's on the audiobook you can't tell at all.
And he falls, and as he falls, he's got the key, and like it just ends with him falling off the thing with the key in his hand. And two things to kind of connect back to what Will said. You don't actually get because like I think it would have been much better for him to get the key, and then for Saturday to still have enough power because of her sorcerers to like for them to have a battle, like a fight, a showdown, and for her to like yell at him and plead her case and you know do the thing, you know, to have the big confrontation that has been building up the entire thing, and for her to potentially bleed her sorcerers dry in her quest to take him down and at the expense, and then for him to make a decision that like I can't let this continue, what am I going to do in this moment? And I think that would have been a much better cliffhanger, and then could have developed into some of like into the next book better.
The other thing I think could have worked is doing more with the Piper, because the thing is, basically, we're going to learn early in Book Sunday that without the key, her will is too superior. Saturday's will is too weak, and she immediately just becomes the lackey of the Piper, and it's like such a disappointing end to a character who otherwise had been built so up. So I feel like this book could have dealt with that conflict. Oh, and then the other big thing is that the Piper hates Sunday, and one of his big motivations is that he thinks Sunday threw him into nothing, which dissolved him and all of that stuff. But we also figure out at the beginning of Saturday that no, Saturday did it. She just said that Sunday had done it. And like that's a really nice little betrayal and stakes that could have been played with. So I feel like the end of this book should have been the showdown of Arthur versus the Piper versus Saturday, and that conflict could have been resolved in a way that's really interesting. And then we go back into Sunday with, okay, now it's Arthur, the Piper, and Sunday, and we don't have to. Saturday gets her moment and her big culmination because basically she's going to be dealt with as an afterthought in Sunday. So like it's not like he was saving her for anything.
It's a really odd choice, and it's also the weirdest cliffhanger. Like I think he was trying to set up for the next book where it wasn't a clear, but I think it would have almost worked better for him to get his like the key and then have to reckon with what he needed to do, and like the all of the other trustees has been fucking shit up, and is he really going to go into Sunday's realm and start a fight with someone, you know, who has been minding their own business and as far as they know not fucking with the secondary realms. But we end on that cliffhanger. Also, Susie got separated from Arthur, and the Will went and found Susie. And they're off doing stuff trying to find Arthur, and then Yeah, and then Arthur falls off the thing. Which brings us into the second book where Arthur is falling in the air. He's got the 3 keys. But he's falling, and then he uses one of the keys to no, he only has 2 keys. He has the 5th key, and now the baton is
Yes.
with
Yes.
yeah. So he just has the mirror and the quill. The key for Saturday was a quill, which I think would have worked better if it was for Friday, given that what Friday did, and then all of Saturday's people were looking into mirrors.
Yeah, that is weird, actually. I don't know. I was always annoyed that the keys were just random objects. I wanted them all to be time based because the whole thing is that these trustees control one day out of the week, and then Mondays was a clock, a small and a large clock hand, and so like all of them I thought should be time based, and instead they're just random objects, which I didn't love.
It's funny because I had the same thing, especially even when I was younger, like thinking it was all just going to be like time based or clock hands, but different kind,
Yeah.
and then they would come together to form a clock at the end or something. But so he's falling in the air, old Arthur. He's fallen in the air, and then he draws a set of stairs as he falls into the improbable stairs. But he's falling down, and the thing about the improbable stairs is you have to really keep your destination in your mind, and you have to try not think about other stuff because it will take you to stuff. It'll take you to places you don't want to go if it knows there are places you don't want to go. And it ends up dropping him on this weird alien planet where there are these creatures that have these like light heat gun rays, and it like blows a hole through, like it takes off half of his head, and he has to like regrow it with the keys. And sorcery is painful, and it hurts, and healing himself is very painful, and Arthur has to deal with a lot of pain in this book inflicted by himself through his ability to heal himself with these keys. But he ends up all on the improbable stairs, wanting to go to his bedroom at home, and he knows he shouldn't because it's in the real world. And he wakes up and he's on the bed. He poofed himself there through the improbable stairs, and he goes downstairs, and his mom is sitting on the couch just reading, and she's been missing for like the past 3 books. She's been missing from Earth, but also missing from the secondary. Like nobody knew where she was, and basically Sunday has poofed his house and his mother into his improbable gardens.
And basically his improbable gardens are like a museum. He just keeps things there in a loop, and that's like his main thing that he wanted to do was just to keep things in a loop, which is like, it's an interesting, again, it's a kind of an interesting idea, twist on the idea of like the house as a parasite on the secondary realms. And like, his whole thing is pride. That's his big sin. And so like it kind of makes sense. But Arthur isn't able to interact with his mother. She's just there stuck. And basically like when you try to use the improbable stairs in the incomparable gardens, it doesn't really work very well because it was the first place created plot stuff. And so basically very quickly he gets captured by Sunday, who chains him up to a clock like the old one is chained up to one. And Arthur is going to spend most of the book here. Like, and I didn't love it. I like Sunday as a character because he feels very like not like a villain. He just kind of, he's proud. He just kind of wants to do his own thing, but he's also not going to stoop to letting other people help. And so like, he's like, I'll deal with the Saturday thing and then the house or whatever. And one of the things is that you can't threaten, the keys have to be kind of freely given. So like he's kind of trying to trick Arthur into it and be like, oh, I'm going to take out your eyes. And then he doesn't because he can't actually like threaten him. And Arthur's at one point he throws away or he loses the yellow elephant.
Arthur makes a mistake of thinking about the mariner, the captain, and he has this little metal stone with a hole in it. And if he speaks into the hole, the mariner will come help him. And the mariner has promised to only help him 3 times. He's used it twice, and he's got 1 more left. And so he goes in and he's like, I'm trapped in this clock. They're going to eat my eyes. You have to come help me, bro. But he thinks to himself, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this thing. And as he thinks about it, he puts his hand towards the pouch on his side, and Sunday takes it and throws the elephant and the thing off. And Will's right. He's sitting there thinking about how, like, he he can't affect anything within himself. Like he's trying to like break his chains, none of that is working, and he just thinks about his elephant, and he thinks about how happy it made him when he was a kid, and how he would genuinely talk to elephant and think about elephant as a real thing. And as he's having this, something pokes him, and it's his elephant, but it's alive now as a little like happy little yellow elephant. And Arthur's like so happy, and it's very comforting. And then he asks the elephant to go get the little stone that fell into the garden, and then the elephant like tromps off and goes. And then there's a part where he's talking to Sunday, and there's a little trunk waving at him in a little flower bush, and it's just so cute. And I'm just like, I will die for elephant. Like I will fucking die.
That's one of the things Nix does, which is smart in this book, is he connects Arthur back to his childhood. Like when he went to his room, I'm like, oh, of course. Before the end and the final journey, he has to reconnect with who he was. And the elephant is like a very like, oh, it's his childhood come to life.
And there was a point earlier where he hugs elephant, and like to ground himself in who he is. And it's where he's and he thinks about it when like there's a point where he was going to kill this Piper's child that was Sunday in disguise, and he stops himself and he thinks about his elephant, and he's like, I'm Arthur Penhaligon, I'm not going to do this. And then and so it's just this really nice little emotional core that is given to us, because we don't have that really with like other characters really. But we get it with this little elephant. And then once Arthur does the thing with the mariner, he realizes, I need to get out of this sooner rather than later. So he asks Elephant to go, because his keys are taken from him. Sunday puts them in this like silver net and like takes it up somewhere. And Arthur's like, they took my stuff up there. Don't touch the keys themselves, but find the silver thing that they're in and release me. And there is this point so Elephant goes off, Sunday comes back, and this is the moment where Arthur realizes no one's going to come and take his eyes out, because Sunday can't, like if he physically hurts him to get him to do it, it's not freely given. But if his hope was that Arthur would be scared enough that he'd freely give it.
Nah, can't beat the Arthur, man. Nice try.
Because Arthur's just like, fine, let them take my eyes. Fuck it, I'll grow them back. Sunday fucks off again, and Arthur hears the little trumpeting, because his elephant has been getting bigger and got little tusks, and there's literally a point where Elephant's like, I'll fight him, but he's not talking. He's just like, he uses and he's like, no, don't do any of that, just get in, get out safely. But there's this part where he hears Elephant like trumpeting, making his little trumpeting and making his noises, and he's obviously in distress, and it gets quieter and quieter, and Arthur's like fucking angry. He is so angry, and he's upset, and he's just like pulling against his chains, crying out for Elephant, not caring who hears him. And then the bag with the keys come flying at him. He gets his keys, he releases himself, and he shouts like, I'm coming for you, Elephant. And it's just this sad moment of knowing that this thing, his connection to his childhood, is probably dead. And he's got his keys back, and he's strong, and he feels the power of it, but you realize that he's losing a bit of himself again. And it's just such a nice scene, and I wish it had a little bit more on the after side. So like this is like the first side of the coin, and then when he gets to finally see Elephant, I wish it had been a bigger moment, because this moment made me cry while I was reading it, because it was just, man, don't kill the dogs, you know. And Elephant is it's just
no.
And
I felt that too. I was like, oh, but yeah, I would have liked if it had led to more of like, okay, I got to leave childish things behind, or I'm going to go rage mode or something. But it doesn't quite have enough impact. I mean, that's a weird...
Or just like a moment where he sits with it and he holds it, and he's like, because when he finds Elephant again, it's just back to being lifeless toy elephant. And so the life that was imbued in it is gone, and which is what happened when he was young. It was a imaginary friend, and then it was just a toy elephant. And I wish there was a moment of mourning for that, like holding it in his arms. Similarly, where I wish there was a better moment for the fucking mariner.
And that's the other thing. So basically, by the way, this whole Arthur plot line is about 30% of the book. About 70% of the book is Leaf and Susie fighting and doing adventures. And like, I liked that part, but like for me, I didn't find it exciting because I know what's going to happen at the end. And so like, all that stuff I know isn't really going to lead up to anything. There's this whole weird side quest where Leaf becomes like the keeper of the door,
Lieutenant Keeper of
but
the
it
Door.
doesn't go anywhere. She just then loses the sword, and like it's just like this weird plot cul-de-sac that felt like, okay, we need Leaf to do something, or I had this idea early on, but it's not going to really add to anything.
I wish they wouldn't have done that. She just ended up with Daisy.
Daisy's a much cooler, yeah.
And I love Daisy. Like, Daisy is such again, God, way to give us emotional ties to stuff. So I guess we should explain that. Leaf was in the real world with Arthur's brother, and they were gonna go to, because she went to the relief
Do
place.
we really need to describe it? Because it doesn't go anywhere.
No, but I want to
Okay,
talk.
all right,
I want
yeah,
to
yeah.
talk about
Okay, go ahead.
Daisy. And so Arthur's brother and this other lady take her to the hospital where all of Friday's sleepers are now at. But like, you know, there was a nuclear blast nearby, so they didn't, and like the government didn't know that this hospital existed. So they go to see it, but as they get there, stepping through the front door is Sunday's Dusk, who's called the Reaper. He has a scythe. And he has a like tentacle plant monster that has a daisy for a head. And it's like this weird giant.
Have you ever seen the Flonase commercials? Like the allergy monster in that is kind of what I imagined it as, because it's like it's a plant monster, and at first, and he has it by a chain, and so like it's all dangerous. But what happens is that later Leaf is able to grab onto the chain, and so Daisy will fight for her, and then at some point.
And listen to her.
But then at some point she loses the chain, but Daisy still sticks with her and like helps her out.
Yeah, because she's nice to Daisy. She pets Daisy at one point and is like, good, Daisy. And like, she's just nice to Daisy. And Daisy's like, I like this lady. And so even when she's not under the control of the magic lead, she's still nice. Because there's a point where like the characters are all like, we're going to have to re-lead her because Leaf's out and nearly dead. And they're like, what are we going to do? And then Leaf's like, nah, I'll just ask her. And like, it's just this really like, I don't know. I love Daisy. I love me the little animal companions.
Yeah, it's cute. And the thing is, like, thematically, it should be speaking to the themes of the book, and that like humans are kind to things, whereas denizens don't have that. They just kind of think everything functions on its own. And so because she was kind to the because she was kind to the lion with the thorn in its paw, later it doesn't eat her and the other Christians in the arena. Like, it should be that dynamic, but like, it doesn't. And again, that's the thing, is that there's a lot of Garth Nix is good at showing plot lines, but he's not great at culminating them. And I think because the books don't really have a strong thesis or message, in the end, events kind of just happen one after another, but they don't really have a lot of impact. Because the next thing that happens, right, is that the Mariner is able to get the tree free, which is the next part of the will, which again has an inexplicable Australian accent. Only Sunday's Key could break into it.
Yeah, it's in a cage, and the cage is death, and that's what killed Elephant, is the elephant touched the bars of the cage. And it's in the Elysium, which is the first thing the architect ever created. It's the garden.
Yeah, Eden, Elysium, and Green Walls. Oh yeah, it is actually a tree. and the way that Dame Prime is. Oh, I didn't catch that till right now. I'm so stupid.
How did you not just?
Yeah, the way that Dame Prime merges with it is she eats an apple from it. That's so funny. I totally missed that.
They have to release the will so that he can get the key, and because unfortunately the only way to open the cage that the will is in is with the key. But the Mariner's harpoon, which featured heavily in the second book, is what they need. And so the Mariner, he had summoned earlier, so the Mariner's here, and the tree's like, you need to go get him and get him here before Sunday does, because Sunday is on his way to deal with this. But behind Sunday, there was this really cute moment where Arthur looks through a little what are those called? Telescope, and he sees or a looking glass, and he sees the red uniforms of the regiment attacking the rear of Friday's group, or Sunday's group, and he's like wahoo!
For the regiment.
For the regiment. And it's just this cute, like, oh man, he had his time in the military.
He sticks with it.
So then we're on a race against the clock where he has to go get the Mariner. He gets to the Mariner and explains, I need you to go open this thing. And the Mariner was like, all things must come to an end. And then Arthur's like trying to run, and the Mariner's like, no, we have time. look at Sunday, it's okay. And then all of a sudden the mariner's like, never mind, we don't have time. And they start running and they get there and the mariner's like, you want me to use the harpoon on this thing? And he was like, yes. And he was like, this is the last thing I can do for you. You had your 3 favors. And because he made a promise that he would help Arthur 3 times, so he has to do this. And when he touches the harpoon to the thing, it opens the thing, but then his harpoon dissolves into a little sea wave and the salt smell in the air, and the mariner just dies. Who's this character who's showed up multiple times throughout the book series, who has just been like absolute lovable.
And it's like his life is spent for nothing in terms of what we get from the book. This is not a decision Arthur made. He didn't know the mariner was going to die. What I would have liked actually is earlier in the book if he had been able to summon the mariner and then Lord Sunday had been able to like curb stomp to defeat the mariner, because it would have been a moment of like, oh shit, I don't have that mentor character. I played my card and all of a sudden I don't have that card to play anymore, and so now I'm vulnerable. And then that would have made Sunday really hate Arthur because he had to kill his brother to like, that would have been a really interesting kind of dynamic. But here, and this is what I mean by like the plot elements had just happened but they don't synergize. He just dies and it's like, okay.
And Sunday, like, bends down and, like, touches him and is like, ah, brother. And I'm like, oh, are we going to get an emotional impact about how, like, he's Sunday's opposite? Sunday was always happy staying in his one little place and rooting himself. The mariner
clever.
was the traveler and who wanted to go explore. And then the piper was the one who connected with humans and, like, people, and his thing was creatures and connecting. And, like, there's 3 parts of, like, a whole kind of... No, we didn't get that. There wasn't even an emotional beat for it because the tree comes out and grabs, because like he goes to, it's almost like he's going to touch his key, like he's holding his brother and he's going to touch his key. The tree comes out and shoots a root at him to keep him from holding it, and Arthur's like, I, Arthur, the heir to the house, blah 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 blah, in truth, in testament, and with no trouble, and like takes the key, and then like there's a battle going on and they're like, you have to stop the battle, and Arthur's like, cool beans, and Arthur's like, I got everything, battle stop, everything stops. The piper comes up with Saturday and the piper's like, Arthur, give me your stuff, and Sunday's like, he's too powerful, brother, you can't do it, like there's nothing to be done now. And then the piper's like, well, then I shall fade into, and he takes off his mask, and what is underneath is the impression through light of what his face was. There's nothing beneath his yellow coat and beneath the mask, and he just fades into nothing. And Saturday's like...
No. Okay, so actually what happens is that... Okay, so what happens is the piper tries to charm Arthur with his pipe, but Arthur destroys the pipe. And there seems to be a thing, and I don't think it's ever explicitly stated, but that the 3 sons are like, they have like soul objects, because when the anchor was destroyed, the mariner died, and when the pipe is destroyed, the piper goes, oh, okay, I'm gonna die in a minute. I'm not gonna die on your terms, I'm gonna die on mine. And he takes off the mask, and then he's like, Lord, brother Sunday, how could you have thrown me into the nothing? And Sunday is like, I didn't.
That wasn't me, bro.
Yeah, and he's like, you bitch. And he takes out a knife and stabs Saturday. And like, it's so anticlimactic to this like story of like betrayal and brothers and Saturday. And it just happens.
And that's how Saturday goes. Yep. It happens very quickly. And then like everybody else comes. Dame Primus is like, good job, Arthur. Now I shall take the last part of the will, and she goes up to the will, and like there's this moment of almost fear with how she says she'll become part of the tree, like the tree will become part of her, and Arthur's like, that doesn't sound great, but Arthur is also like hyped up on the like good vibes from having all of the keys and stuff now, because she gives him everything. She's like, because earlier you're like, is she getting too used to having the keys and having this power? But she's like, here, take them all. They're all yours, buddy. And she bites into the apple, and it's described as like a crunch or a snap that shouldn't have happened, like something wrong. And then she merges into the tree, and then nothing explodes. And like she explodes into just a column of text that says the will of the architect verbally, and then Arthur saying the will of the architect, and then a spout of nothing just bursts through into the incomparable gardens, and through it comes a younger version of the old one who is here. And Arthur's like, oh, what are you? And he was like, don't, you freed me, Arthur, this is in part to your thanks to you. And he merges with the will, and then nothing just explodes everywhere, and everyone is just... gone. And then Arthur, floating in the abyss of nothing, realizes he is still alive. And he looks out, and there, fading back and forth between a kind of an image of Dame Primus, but kind of a masculine figure, almost like the old one, but like still the same, like two sides of a flowing back and forth. And he realizes, you're the architect. And the architect has a conversation with Arthur where she confesses that, yes, she is the architect. And yes, she created the old one because she created a universe, but it was moving so slowly. She wanted it to go faster, so she split herself to help propel things along and to fiddle. And then, things did get faster, but then eventually her and the old one disagreed about how things should be done. So she trapped him in a prison that should have been forever, and literally took the falling apart of the entire house to fully free him. And she just got tired. She was so tired after just the millennia and millennia and millennia of doing this, and that for a long time, her hatred of the old one had fueled her, and then her children had fueled her, and then her curiosity, but she just had nothing left, and she wanted to die. So she separated herself into a will and gave it to the trustees, and the will said, we're going to destroy everything so I can die, because she was the first thing that came out of the nothing. And so she could not die.
And the thing is, the old one is shackled, and so the only thing that could destroy him is the destruction of everything else, and that's the only way she could be joined and die.
And so when she gave the will to the trustees, they were like, we are not going to destroy our world and do this thing. Like, absolutely not. So then the will corrupted the keys. In its separation, corrupted the keys to corrupt the trustees, so that eventually, even though they weren't listening to her will, they were by themselves destroying the house. And so the fall of the lower house and the lack of efficiency because of the sloth of Monday was, in fact, being his poisoning and turned into Monday was caused by the will. And they eventually, through that corruption, just started doing the thing she wanted. And then Arthur got pulled in when that piece of the will escaped. And he's like, what the heck? And she's like, well, I'm a go. But you're the architect now. And he's like, the fuck you mean? And she's like, you're the architect. And he's like, but I didn't want a new world. I was happy with it as it was. And she goes, well, that's your choice. And then she fucks off, and he's sitting there and he's like, what am I going to do? And then he realizes that he thinks about recreating his universe, but fixing it. But then he realizes how much complication that would be, and how much fuckery, like there would be so many issues.
Well, first he thinks about making a new one. Making a new universe and doing it correctly and not hurrying through it. And then he's like, but I like the old, there's still some part of him that is Arthur that wants the old universe back. And so then he goes, okay, I'll remake it. But to remake it would be like really complicated, changing anything. And basically right before Nothing ate everything, the Atlas, which we haven't talked about in this video, but in the last one, took a snapshot of the universe like a perfect copy. And so what he does is he just pastes that one to recreate the universe as it was right before it died. I didn't like that as a kid, because to me it's like kind of like it was a dream all along. Like I know that okay, so like in Star Trek, the teleporter works probably by destroying you but creating an exact copy of you at the same time on the ground. And like that's really disturbing existentially, even though I'm reading it as fiction, it doesn't really matter because these characters aren't real or not. And so there's something about the fact that everything got destroyed and then remade that I don't that just as a kid I really didn't like. Like if they had been like, okay, it got miniaturized all of a sudden into the Atlas, that would, and then he's going to re-expand it, that wouldn't have bothered me as much. But for some reason the whole copy and paste kind of bothered me, and I still don't love it, but I like this ending more now than I did originally.
The other thing is it's not the world, so you can't do so the one thing I'll say is it doesn't feel like was it all a dream, because the world has all the effects of the interaction.
Right, yes.
It's a secondary realm still. The bomb still went off. Uh, and, you know, all of the chaos that was there is still there in the secondary realms. There was no way to do it and not have the bomb go off. Again, he thought about, like, well, how can I just fix what was there? Or, like, you kind of get the idea that, like, Arthur would be like, let me not do racism.
Yeah.
Let me not do racism. But then that wouldn't be the world he had created. And so he does it. And then he wakes up. And it's young Arthur. It's regular old 13-year-old Arthur just and he's on the hill of the Elysium. Oh, I should explain that while architect Arthur is thinking about this, he creates a rock which was the rock in the Elysium, and he sits on it and he thinks. And so there's this moment where he is the thinker. And then the universe comes back, and then young Arthur wakes up in the Incomparable Gardens in the Elysium. In the Elysium, not the Incomparable Gardens. And he wakes up and he's like, I'm 13 again. Like, what is this? And then Arthur, the architect, appears, and he had separated himself, like the architect separated the old one from her self, because that is what Arthur, the child within the architect, wanted. He wants to go live his life and be his thing, but he confesses that he was able to, anything that was within the Elysium, he can remake very easily as it was, but the stuff that was outside the Elysium and the universe, so like the secondary realms, he could remake, but anything within the house that was outside of the Elysium, he cannot recreate and perfectly. And Arthur's mother was in the Incomparable Gardens outside of the Elysium, on her display in the house. And so while his father has been, like, while Earth is back and his siblings and his father is all good, he has lost his mother in this. Like, and this would be so much better if she had been a more impactful character throughout. Like, I cried more for Ellie, the elephant.
And he had more screen time.
He had more screen time than his mother did. And it's just such a shame, because I kind of like his mother as a character in concept, but she just really doesn't have enough screen time. So he loses his mother and he, like, cries as a child for this loss. And then he's like, but what about Leaf? And the architect is like, oh yeah, she's good, she's over there. And, like, Leaf's just, like, sleeping, and she comes to, and he's like, what are you gonna do about the house and the denizens? And he's like, I don't know. And he was like, what about, like, Susie and the ones that were in the Elysium? And he's like, yeah, I can make them, maybe, you know, I'll see how I feel. And he's so then Arthur goes back to his world, and Susie, Leaf and him go to Cyril.
Yeah, the cool old lady from Thursday.
And we don't get, like, what happens on that end, but what we do get is we get the architect version of Arthur now in
called Art,
who wears 21st century clothing. He's wearing jeans. He's got cool shades on.
Cool sunglasses, which is so funny.
He's got cool sunglasses, and he's talking to Susie, and Susie's like, well, you know, thanks for bringing me back. And I guess, and basically he's asked her to be the new Sunday. And she's like, yeah, I guess I'll take it. I'll take the position. And then she's like, but I'd really like to grow up. I have been a child. I'm thousands of years old. I would really like to grow up. And he hands her a mirror, and she's like, that'll do nicely. And, because it starts with her going, well, I'm not calling you Lord or Architect. I'm not calling you sir. And he was like, wouldn't dream of it. And she's like, okay, Art, let's do this. And he's like, we're going to rebuild the house together. And that's how it ends. And so you have the two Arthurs. You have Art the architect, who is the denizenification, but also not a denizen. Denizen have blue blood, and we didn't mention this, but Arthur
he's the architect. He is God now, essentially. And then there's the child version of him, which thinks it's a human version, but he lied to it, essentially, so it will grow up and live a human life, but then at the end it will rejoin him, most likely, in the same way that the old one did. I think I would have liked that more if it had been pitched as that, like that God needed the human experience to become to not fall into the old architects.
That's exactly what I was going to say should have been explicit.
Yeah.
Is that he became a better architect because he had the human experience and the experience of living in the universe that she created. She was too far removed to fully be as good, because she had the creativity, but she didn't have the the exact creativity of humans, and I think the experiences of it. And I think that would have tied much better into Friday and Friday's obsession for the need of human experiences, and the idea that like there is this thing that as denizens and as these separate creatures they will never experience, which is the experience of the organic life that comes, that evolves and is like self-sustaining and goes on its own, like that doesn't need a creator's hand past a certain spark point. And so I wish that would have been explicit, because that's definitely the vibe I got. And he does specifically say that he lies to Arthur, like, and he doesn't tell the full truth. And I wish it would have been honest, that like, I wish it would have ended with a line saying, and Arthur lived his years happily and was able to live his life, and then at his death awoke again at the side of the architect and joined and became this one who was further enriched by his experiences of the rest of the joys of humans' life.
And that's when he meets Susie, when he has died and become the architect, and he's like, now I can begin my work. The thing is, it's actually very Christian in the whole idea of God gave his son to be human. Like, one of the interpretations of it is that it was he had Jesus suffer so that he understood human suffering, or he understood humanity. That's not the common interpretation, but that is one of the literological. I don't know what word I was trying to say. I'm trying to be smart, guys. Just pretend. If any of you have made it this far in the video, but like, so that like is a very interesting idea of like, yeah, okay, maybe he realizes, okay, I lived a human life. I know that now. I have come back. I'm bringing Susie back with me. Now we'll build the house, and then like that's when you kind of get art. And it's funny. I really like that ending, because I was thinking like more odd stuff should happen. Like, okay, maybe Susie becomes the architect, or maybe like he convinces the architect to go make a new world and do it correctly this time, but leave this one as the way it was. But yeah, you're right. That actually would have been really interesting.
I don't even mind Susie and the just architect Arthur going off and starting the process, and then the other Arthur getting to click in and kind of like look at it. And I like the idea of him waking up within the architect body and looking at Susie, and Susie knowing that like the human, and like
she's like, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, and like and having that, God, I could cry thinking about it, because it would have been such a impactful moment. And I like the idea of that, like, he gives his child self the ability to live the life that he wanted to, but that ultimately they have to come back together, and like this is his destiny. And it's not how it ends, but it is a very like sweet.
I like the ending now more that we've interpreted it the way we want to. Funnily enough,
but that's how I had interpreted it. Like I finished it and I was like, that motherfucker is gonna live forever and is gonna end up back over there, you know. But it just, I think having it more explicit and would have been really nice. And sweet, you know, like a little bittersweetness to it, like and
then it's like starting anew, and then you get Susie as like the reinforcement of his humanity, even once he is this new art guy. No, I think that's totally, that's a much better ending. I like that much more. I'm gonna pretend that's the ending.
Yeah, we can pretend that's the ending.
It doesn't really fix all the problems with like the plot culminations beforehand, but like that is a much better ending.
I also would have loved if Dame Primus then like got to be its own thing after, like maybe just a very old lady in the corner. Well, I guess she had to die.
Well, it could have been something where like she's like, why'd you bring me back? I didn't even like you. And he's like, well, it's good to have a counterpoint or something like that. Or like, now you will have to learn to actually be someone instead of just a will. Like, that kind of could have been an interesting idea as well. I really love this series. I loved it. It was so much fun to read.
It was so much fun. It's just so fun.
I also like that Arthur and Leaf don't end up together, like, romantically, and Arthur and Susie don't.
Nobody ends up with anyone.
And, like, I think as kids, that's a good lesson to learn.
Yes, that, like, not every friendship you have with someone of the opposite sex has to be romantic, and that not everything has to be romantic. And also, that, like, Arthur could be gay for all we know.
I mean,
like,
okay,
there's
all
never
right,
a
all right.
single
Let's not,
moment.
okay. This isn't fanfic.
No, but that's my point. Is like there is no one way or another. There is no, like, it doesn't even engage with it, and it's so rare to find something where there's like not even like it's not even like he has a crush.
Yeah, no, there's nothing
on like someone. There's not even a hinty hint of any of that. And I think it just works really well. And it also is just a joy after being just bashed overhead with all the pairings that the books we've read have shoved down our
Something I
throats.
realized after Divine Rivals is that part of the problem is that these books feel, when they're doing their like spiciness, they feel like they're flaunting it in your face. Like, oh, look at, and I'm sorry for the gendered whatever, but like, oh, look at my cleavage, guys, aren't I hot? Or like whatever the man version of cleavage is, like
The chiseled
no, or the
chest,
deep,
like
the fuck. What did you call them? The cock channels?
V?
You called them something.
what did I call
You
them?
called them like I don't know, but like, yeah, that annoying gross V that men have. And like, it's literally like, they're like, isn't this hot? And it's like, no, I don't want that. It's there's something almost aggressive about it that I like.
Please note, I've never called them annoying or gross. I'm actually a fan of the V. Like,
No. I meant people flaunting
Yeah.
it, not you. Yes,
Yes,
no,
yes.
Maria is a full sexual being, guys. It's okay. Don't tell her moms.
I just didn't want people to like think that I referred to them as the disgusting V. Like, no, not me.
Yeah, just to be clear, guys. But like, there's a flauntingness to it that I think is what really bothers me sometimes about those spicy scenes. But again, and I think especially for middle schoolers, it's really valuable to be like, yeah, men and women are friends. It's cool. It's fine. And not every story has a romance as the reward at the end, because that's sort of a problem with how fiction works. Is that, I'll get into it later, but it can be kind of a problem that like, the reward for doing the right thing is a romantic relationship, and in this case that's not the case, and I think that's kind of valuable for kids.
It's so good.
It's so good.
And again, you probably noticed we complained a lot about the last book. I enjoyed the last book because I didn't know how it was going to end. I enjoyed the last book much more than William did. And of the last three, I think it's the strongest. Unfortunately, because of how it ends, it does take the teeth. And it didn't hit, like, the Mariner's death and the elephant could have used a little bit more. But for me, it was just the funnest of the last, like, the most engaging of the last three. The other ones, I was just like, they just weren't as interesting for me. And so the last one, like, I liked the claustrophobia of him just being trapped on that clock and then thinking he was going to get his eyes taken out, and him reconnecting with the elephant like that. So for me, that worked.
The battles too are cool, and you guys know how much I love battles.
And they're good battles. They're fun battles.
That's sort of one of the sad things about this is, like, nobody really remembers this series, and it's so good, and like, that is kind of sad in a way that, like, you know.
I'm actually interested to see. Oh, also, if you got this far in the book, if you got this far in this video, comment. What are we gonna have them comment? They need to comment something below to show that they made it this far.
Hashtag the real keys were the friends we made along the way.
Yes. Hashtag the real keys were the friends we made along the way. If you read this, if you watched this far.
All right. Top of the list, Sir Thursday.
Yes. It's absolutely
top of the list.
Right up there.
Bottom of the list,
Top.
Friday.
Absolute bottom of the list.
Okay. And then the other ones are tough. I think Wednesday. No, you go ahead.
Wednesday's easy
yes.
for me.
Okay.
Wednesday's
yes. No, that's what I was gonna say.
Like, that's easy. Thursday, Wednesday 2, and then I would say Tuesday.
Yes, I was gonna also say Tuesday. Yes, and then under that
for me, Sunday.
I was gonna put Saturday, but honestly, it was gonna be a toss up between Saturday and Sunday. So we'll put Sunday and then Saturday. And then the first book. And the funny thing is, the first book is, like, very good. Like, I don't dislike it.
For me, I'd put the first book above Saturday. For me, it is Sunday, Monday, Saturday, Friday.
Yeah, okay. I think I agree with that. I might put it above Sunday, but maybe not. I don't know. There's a lot of faffing about in the first book that I don't love in the first half, like, until they get to the house. I'm like, this is good, but I want to get to the house. So, yeah, no, I think that's a solid list. Thursday, it's funny, they go down in order. Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Sunday, Monday, Saturday, Friday.
Yeah.
That's
the, I think, solid, definitive rank. You've been ranked, Nix. You've been ranked.
That's what's up.
Hashtag
ranked. That's also another hashtag you guys can use if you made it to this part of the video. Leave in a comment. Have you guys read this series? Are you interested in reading it? are there any other books from your childhood, like the middle grade, that you guys remember? Because I used to read a lot of these books. They were like the little short chapter books that were series, like and like they were very formative for me. The Remnant series, the Seventh Tower series, a few others that weren't as good, but I still remember. But yeah, we really liked this series. This video won't do well, but that's one of the things we like about having a Patreon, is that it allows us to do books we like instead of just following the algorithm. What does that even mean, though? Patreon.
What it is that there are humans on this planet that go, I like the cut of your jib, for me, Katie, and Will. And they go, I like what you're doing here, and I'd like you to continue doing it. So they have graciously offered to pay us a set amount every month to support us. And depending on what that set amount is, they get to be part of one of our 3 Patreon tiers. We start with the normal Patreons, which get to be part of our Discord and talk with cool people. There's a lot of writers. When I tell you, the Discord on its own is just a great time. We have done some stuff that any patron could get, like Katie and I watched Hogfather during Christmas. We did a watch party, and we had some of the, like, whoever was available watched it with us, and we would like to continue doing that kind of stuff, and that's just any patron.
I've been engaging more with the Discord, and it's fun. You post memes. We have a mental health channel, which, like, I recently was having trouble with some stuff, and I posted there, and I actually felt better afterwards, which was weird. I talk with the patrons there. I'm really there more than Maria. Maria lurks. She's always watching but never commenting.
I do. I lurk.
It's really
so
funny
hard.
because I'll just say a random thing and then she'll comment, and I'm like, "You were watching this whole time, you son of a bitch."
Or sometimes I'll message him and I'll be like, da, 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 like, this thing is happening, or like, I was seeing this and I'm talking to him about it, or like, I'll just come in and, like, if someone's talking about something that I think Will should know about, I'll be like, hashtag Will.
And then we have a book club. You guys get to pick 1/4 of the books we read a year through polls. Those have been interesting, and honestly, doing the live streams for those, and we do 2 a month, one that I pick and one that you guys pick. Those are so much fun. Like, there really is just so much fun. I would actually do more, but I don't want to dilute how many people feel like read and like that kind of a thing. But like, there's so much fun to do. It's like Twitch, but only with cool people. Because I thought, like, oh, I should become a streamer, and then I was like, no, I just like the 10 people who will comment from our community. And then on the final tier, you get the 1 month, once a month, me and Katie will do a critique stream where we look at the prose of a book. A lot of times we do a theme of, like, the last one was like banter. How does Tamsin Muir of the Locked Tomb trilogy fame, how does she write banter? And the thing is, like, it's so funny because doing it yesterday, I was like, oh, I hate doing this because it forces me to be specific, but in being specific, it expands my brain and I can actually understand a thing that I didn't at the beginning. Like, it's really teaching me, and you guys are just along for the ride, and that's a lot of fun. And then me and Katie do that for about an hour and then talk about genitals for about an hour after that. So, you know, double feature.
Great time.
All right. We love you, our parasocial darlings.
Bye.